Hi everyone and welcome back to this third episode in the series about the restoration of Shrikalov's house. Most of the primary work is already nearing completion at this point, and today I'd like to tell you about the journey we've had on our way here and why it proved difficult to make videos consistently. It would probably be more entertaining to see how things changed and evolved chronologically, but we couldn't do this unfortunately, and in this episode I'm going to tell you why. We had two foremen working on the project. One foreman was from Yekaterinburg. He traveled from Yekaterinburg to Sisert every time, and this trip takes quite a while. This, of course, wasn't very convenient, especially when the work was in full swing, when there were several contractors working on the site simultaneously, and it had to be visited almost every day. This led to an unpleasant situation with the deadlines, so we had a little discussion, worked things out, and decided that we had to hand these responsibilities of maintaining the working process over to someone else. So I found another foreman. This was a person who lived in Sisert, and he was able to be on the site every day without any issues and coordinate the work there. During this time, I was in Yekaterinburg, and I did of course also visit the site, albeit not every day. However, I was also spending several hours each day checking the video reports, having a look at the documents, making payments on the invoices, etc. So in essence, this also was taking quite a bit of time, despite the fact that I had a representative on site. At a certain point, the second foreman simply disappeared after having brought several of his own contractors. The workmen didn't know what happened to him, so naturally I've started visiting the site myself. About 2 weeks had passed and we still couldn't reach this person. His men were working, but all the payments, transactions, salaries and bits of accounting were still going through him. By that time, I had realized that we would have to set up the working process without this person's further involvement. At that point, we had some 12 to 15 people on site every day. They included landscapers, 2 electricians, 1 plumber. Several people were doing tile work, several people were doing paint work. We had someone on low voltage equipment and alarm installation, we had carpenters on site, and finally, some people working on the roofing. So when I eventually arrived, I went up to the attic in order to have a look at how everything was up there. I won't go into the technical details too much, but in essence, the roofing was prepared for insulating, meaning that it was sheathed with coarse board on the inside, the new roofing itself was already installed on the outside, and between the two was a cavity, into which echo wool was meant to have been blown. But they used the wrong film on the outside portion of the roofing. It was already caught between the battens and the counter battens, so it was impossible to remove. And that was our hydro windproof film. The remaining cavity, which was intended for insulation, was of course designed for a particular thickness of the insulation layer. So given that because of this mistake, the outer film was now vapor-proof, the moisture would still have to find an exit. You'd get condensation because of the differences in temperatures, but that condensate will have nowhere to go because it is sealed in. Luckily, we discovered this issue just in time, and now we had a bigger concern regarding the order of the work. So with such an extensive list of contractors working on the building, this roofing issue was a major setback, because it made all other processes that much more difficult, both the work that was being done in the surrounding area and inside of the house. There was also a conflict situation we've had with the workmen, because the original task was given to them by the now absent foreman, and you can imagine their response when some owner of the building turns up and starts telling them how things should have been done. In the end, these people left the site and we simply sealed the opening in the floor overlap so that this change in contractors didn't affect us too much and we could continue on with the remaining work outside of the attic. We found new contractors and redid everything, but you can imagine the amount of effort and additional work this required. And during this process, we've also found many other issues with how the work was being done previously. For example, joists have been installed back to back with the fireplace chimneys. The chimneys are made of sandwich pipes, meaning they feature two layers of metal with insulation in between. So in essence, the installation of the joists and guides going through the sheathing of the ceiling was done wrong, and we had to reinstall them as well. These are all the various small reasons why we couldn't record videos consistently. When you are on site and engaged in an intensive working process, it can prove difficult to record material simply because there isn't much time left for it. Last time we did an external overview back in winter, when I showed you how everything was. And now it's already May, the summer is almost here. The roofing has already been done, we can see the new covering. Both snow stops and routing for roof drains are now in place. We are now removing some unwanted parts from the neighboring building. All these things are accumulated and placed neatly here in front of the house, and we'll dispose of some of them later. We are now dismantling this porch, and you can see some of the artifacts we found in the process, like this chest. That's the front door, sandblasted to remove the old layer of paint. Here are the newly installed windows on the semi-basement level. We are now discussing the possibility of restoring these molded arches here. It might have been unclear in the previous episode, but these window openings must have been cut out at a different point in time compared to the other ones. My current assumption is that these openings were cut at some later stage. Meanwhile, the openings located on this side have definitely been done earlier. Soon we're going to remove these old slopes which are already falling off and start restoring the molded decor on the arches. Here we have mended the rotten and crumbling spots on the walls, sandblasted and polished the timber. And soon we will replace some of the windows in this floor. Down there we've installed a new metal flight of stairs, and all the tiles have been removed from the floors here. In this bathroom we've also removed and replaced the rotten part in the wall, and now we've started laying tiles. Фрагмент гнилой вырезали, значит, здесь отрезали, заменяли какие-то не очень хорошие участки по стенам. The old tiles have also been removed and the floors are being leveled, but let's continue on. Here most of the electrical cabling is already done as well. We've also sandblasted these window slopes here. You can see how much nicer they look now compared to their previous state. And we've done the same for the window sills. Among other things, we've also caulked all the gaps, cleaned them up, and now everything is more or less consistent. Right now, in some rooms, as you can see, we've poured the floors in, having removed all the old tiles left by the previous owner. In essence, we're getting ready to cover the walls in protective solutions, pour in all the remaining floor parts, and begin laying PVC tiles. In the second bathroom, as you can see, we're almost done with the tiling as well. This is the preserved part of the wooden wall, and the bath itself will go here. The windows have also been sandblasted, as they were everywhere else. We are still laying the electrical cables here. We've removed the old door, which used to be here, and are now restoring this lintel and overall making the doorway ready to house a set of new doors. As you can see, we have skirtings here made of cement and mortar. This bathroom is already finished and ready for installation of all the faucets, fixtures and everything else. We've left the ceilings open for now, just sandblasted them again, and these are the already finished floors here. All the brick has been thoroughly cleaned, we've vacuumed it, we've blown the dust out, and now it's been lacquered twice. It is a bit shiny as of now, and we'll address that after we're done with all the other surfaces, but as things stand, we've made some progress in terms of cleaning the place up. We've also decided to make the window sills here out of concrete. We'll simply level the surface and pour in the sills, simple as that. Overall, the space with the brick and the concrete is looking quite nice as a whole so far. I think it's definitely starting to get there. These are the floors we're going to install onto the finished floor layer. Another look at the space as a whole. It does feel rather spacious with all those windows, doesn't it? And here are the new lintels. Across the edge of the ceiling there runs the heating system, and all radiators on both the floors have already been connected. Let's now take a look at the attic. When we were busy with the new roofing, we decided to also work on the attic at the same time. So this is the new interfloor opening that was cut, and we've revealed these old boards which naturally feature throughout. And on top of the old boards, laid over the subfloor, there are newer boards as well. We can see here, there are two boards on top of each other and an empty space in between, and the older boards are covered in glued old documents and letters on the bottom. Here we can also see the two skylights, which are also visible from the street. We've recently learned about some issues here with how the work was being done in the attic, how the contractors were installing the membrane. So after they were done with the roofing and before they went to work on the inside of the attic, they didn't install the membrane. We intended to insulate the roofing with eco wool, but we don't want to alter the process. That's why we're going to take off all the wooden paneling on the inside here, because they installed it in preparation for insulating, but the structure still lacks a membrane layer. There are still some areas where paneling hasn't been installed, and we had to stop the process because, as you can see, there is the windproof film, which is installed on the other side of the building. The overall space of the attic floor is about 45 square meters. We've removed all the straining rods and supporting structures, and in their place made these little walls, which in fact help secure all the same elements, like these cut logs, the quality of which you can see on the cross-section there. The walls also help support these massive beams which hold the roofing together. This is the windproof film and the old battens made out of rather large logs, which we've leveled on top and mounted both new battens and new counter battens onto. So right now here we need an additional ventilation gap. Then we'll add a little bar here and install the membrane so that the moisture and steam are able to actually escape. Because this layer here is both windproof and waterproof, so it won't allow the condensation to escape. This is why we need an extra hollow part here. In this episode, I'd also like to show some videos from a tour I held for the lovely people from the Architects of Russia community. Their program has several modules, some of them take place abroad, some of them at different locations here, and they visited our site as part of one of such internal modules. One of their groups was traveling along the Ural-Siberian track, popped by, and I held a little tour for them and showed the results we'd achieved by that time. We have gas here and are fully done with the boiler room. There are two boilers there, a primary and a secondary one, and we have hydronic heated floors across all of the lower level. The main entrance is actually located on the other side, but we've decided that this is going to be the main entrance. In theory, we can isolate the upper floor because we have a separate entrance here, and we have an entrance to the upper floor on the other side. And the upper floor itself can also be separated into two spaces. In this clip, you could also briefly see the additional plot of land which we were able to purchase from the neighbor. Our plot is only 2 acres, and the purchased extension is a further 1.6. On this neighboring plot, there is a building which we also had to tend to, and we spent some time on landscaping in general, because there was a new fence already built, and we had to remove it. In addition, we had to generally level the terrain between the original plot and the newly bought one. In these clips from the tour, you can see what managing this project looked like after our foreman had disappeared, so to speak. As my wife has put it, my husband left for half a day, and then after a week I found myself driving his belongings there. I just arrived on the site one day and realized that it was simply going nowhere without any hands-on coordination, so I had to stay. And I did. I got a room in the hotel directly opposite the site. My wife later joined me at the hotel and we stayed there together. But after a while you are bound to get a bit fed up with living in a hotel. So in the end we simply drove our caravan to the site and stayed in it instead. The caravan is completely autonomous, it can be connected to a water source, it has a 110 to 120 liter water tank, it has a gauge to check how much water is remaining, it has a shower, hot water and gas heating. It also has 2 separate sleeping areas which can be divided by a rigid curtain, so we can isolate one area from the other. And we could use the solar panels mounted on top of the caravan as well as connected to the conventional electrical line in the house. In essence, we could stay in the caravan for quite a while without any issue, which we did, and as a result were able to coordinate everything that was happening on site. I also wanted to mention some programs and events in which we've taken part recently, dedicated to the topic of renovating historical sites and low-rise architecture in general. Just a couple of days ago, we returned from Tambov. On the 18th and the 19th of August, we took part in a forum called An Environment for Living, which is held by Dom.rf and the Ministry of Construction. It was a 2-day event, it had some very interesting panels, and for me one of the most relevant ones was a panel which had 5 or 6 speakers who presented their best practices, including ones that concerned restoring historical property. And as part of the forum we also had debates about 2 different sites in Tambov. The city has a lot of low-rise wooden buildings, many nice yards and streets. Of course, there are challenges that the city planners, urbanists and the administration are facing, but the overall impression I've had from the city is very positive. And on these same days, the 18th and the 19th of August, a forum dedicated to investing into historical property called House Fair took place. The team, which includes members of the Tom Sawyer Fest, compile a huge catalog of houses that present an investment opportunity. It is a pity that these two events took place at the same time and I couldn't take part in both. Nonetheless, there will probably be a way to have a look at the catalog and see the available offers which various cities like Samara, for example, have. And to round things off, there was also one more event to which I've been invited, an online conference dedicated to working with historic properties as well. I made a presentation there on what, in my opinion, are the opportunities and risks in actualizing historical buildings and infusing them with some contemporary use cases. There are many specialized festivals now, so if we are talking about event marketing and testing some hypotheses, there are even professional operators available who are capable of organizing a thematic festival on the premises of your complex, and these guys can come up with great programs as well. There are also many relevant models and even business models, in particular the joint use of a piece of property or sharing. For example, in Kaliningrad, there are a lot of cases when city villas are in fact now multi-apartment units, and they are in good condition as well. Also, there are cases when some buildings change their function with the passage of time, and sometimes even come full circle. Let's say that we have a city villa which belonged to a single person. It then was split into a multi-apartment unit, and afterwards all these properties were bought up by someone and the space was again used as a whole, as a gallery or an office space, for example. As you can see, the topic of restoring architectural heritage, reimagining it, and assigning new uses to it is very relevant, which is very good news. In my opinion, there are a lot of events going on. There are very many extremely professional and competent speakers and people in general in the scene. And there probably is quite a bit of information, and I mean precise information, on the subject already. For example, I've heard a speaker who was talking about restoring an art quarter in Ufa, and among other things they discussed the financials. In answering a question about how much restoring a historical building actually costs, they replied that currently the amount is about 1,500,000 rubles per square meter. I think that this is very close to reality and very close to our example as well, because this sum is relevant to the restoration process alone, without taking into account the furniture, decorations or equipment. These all are additional costs. So because of this information, we now have a space for dialogue about specific practices, and more importantly, information about budgeting as well. I think this is extremely important, because naturally it's much better to have an idea about the costs before going into this process, so that you don't end up with some unfinished construction because you ran out. In my case, the complete restoration process, including interior work, equipment and everything else, took about a year and a half. I reckon that the workflow that we had was pretty intensive. We are now finishing tallying up all the expenses that we've had during this process, and the sheer number of transactions can be very telling of the overall difficulty of such an undertaking. That's because the total number of transactions, suppliers and other involved parties who were providing services is going to show how many such suppliers and contractors took part in the process. I think it's going to be quite a hefty sum, and I hope to be able to share it once we've done the calculations. As always, feel free to leave any questions you might have in the comments below. I will answer them in the next episode. Thank you for watching, and until next time.